I'm Elizabeth Shanahan Jewett. I hope this week has been good to you. Welcome to Local Matters. Let's talk about what's happening in our area. In observance of the 20th anniversary of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks, and in remembrance of those who lost their lives, the town of Plymouth invites all members of our community to attend a memorial service on Saturday, September 11th, beginning at 9:30 a.m. The service will begin with the Formation March with the Holly Briar Bagpipers, beginning at Plymouth Fire Station number 7 at 15 Hedge Road. Following the march, the Honor Guard will assemble at Plymouth's 9/11 Memorial at 1 South Spooner Street, where there will be a ceremonial laying of a memorial wreath, singing of the national anthem, and Pledge of Allegiance. Plymouth firefighter Stephen Sear will symbolically strike a 5555 alarm on a ceremonial bell to remember the first responders who died in the line of duty on September 11th, as is the tradition of the New York City Fire Department. A moment of silence will follow to commemorate the time of the collapse of the World Trade Center South Tower and in tribute to all civilians, airline pilots, attendants, EMS, police and fire personnel, Port Authority workers, military and civilian workers at the Pentagon, and all the families who lost loved ones in New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. on September 11th, 2001. The memorial service will include remarks from local and state officials, a memorial prayer, police and firefighter prayers, and a benediction. If you are unable to attend in person, you can watch the memorial service live on our community channel, Comcast 13 or Verizon 43, and online at PAC TV Prime. The town of Kingston will also be holding a remembrance ceremony beginning at 8:30 a.m. on September 11th at the Kingston Fire Station, located at 105 Pembroke Street. All community members are invited to attend. PAC TV will be recording this ceremony, which will air next week on our community channels. Check our website for playtimes. School on Wheels of Massachusetts supports the academic, social, and emotional growth of students impacted by homelessness, hoping to end the cycle one child at a time. Julie Thompson invited Chief Executive Officer Stephen Telesmanic on to talk about their mission and the ways that you can help make a difference.
Thank you so much, Steve Telesmanic, for joining us today. You're the CEO of School on Wheels. Now, when I first read about this or heard about it, I thought, oh, you have a school that's actually in a bus and you travel around. So can you tell me why I'm wrong?
So School on Wheels is a program that brings services to students experiencing homelessness. We don't actually have a bus, but the idea is to bring our services of tutoring, mentoring, and backpacks to students in Massachusetts that are experiencing homelessness and really need these services.
So how do you, A, service the entire state of Massachusetts, and B, how do you find out who's newly homeless? Because I know that it's not like, oh, people become homeless in September and they're not again in June. It's a rolling that people become homeless all the time. How do you figure that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, homelessness is real in Massachusetts, and there are nearly 25,000 students in Massachusetts experiencing homelessness. So we identify students that are experiencing homelessness through our shelter partners. We operate in 18 different shelters, primarily in Southeast Massachusetts and Boston. So our shelter partners bring forward children that need help that are in the shelter, but also through homeless liaisons at each of the schools. Every school in Massachusetts is required to have someone designated as their homeless liaison. And we have these contacts at the school, so they provide referrals to us to help us get services to students in the school.
Now this is K through 12? Do you service the entire, the range of school age children?
Yes, K through 12 and beyond. Oftentimes, a student starts with School on Wheels by receiving a backpack during back to school time. So right now it's back to school time, and imagine most families going to the store to doing back to school shopping, getting their backpacks, getting their notebooks, getting their calculators, getting their pencils, pens, artwork. These supplies add up. often could be hundreds of dollars. And that's where we provide over 6,000 backpacks to students experiencing homelessness. This backpack could be a lifeline for these students. And we're so proud and honored to be able to help out these students who really need that extra help. Oftentimes, it's a decision for the family of dinner and school supplies, and we don't want to have that family have to make that tough decision.
Right.
So that's where we provide the backpack.
Now, in a traditional school setting, you have maybe one teacher that has a number of students. Can you do that with this, or do you literally have to individualize for each scenario who can actually help the particular student?
Yes. So, for example, the backpacks, we customize the backpacks to grade level. So we have a pre-K through 3 backpack, and then we have a middle school backpack, and then we also give high school backpacks to have the scientific calculators, which could be near $80 alone for the scientific calculator. So we customize it for grade level. And oftentimes, this is the first point of entry for a student to School on Wheels, to receive that backpack at the beginning of the year. Then we try to work with the shelters to provide tutoring. Again, during back to school time, a lot of these students are getting homework assignments, and they might feel that pressure that they might not have that support system at home to help them with their homework. So we're able to provide them with tutors that work with them one-on-one to help them with their homework and different assignments that may come along the way. So again, we're providing tutoring K through high school, but we also have a mentoring program for students in high school and beyond that match these students with positive role models in the community that help them through challenges they may come across.
So if I hear you, you do tutoring and you do mentoring. Now, the children or the students that are in homeless shelters, do they actually get bused to the school in the district that the shelter is in? And then you augment that with the tutoring, or do they not? Is the tutoring their entire education?
So students have the choice of which school that they want to go with. Oftentimes, again, it's very transient, their living situation, and they could find semi-permanent housing throughout the school year and then get moved multiple times throughout the year. So it's very challenging for a student to stay consistent throughout the school year. Some of the students want to stay with their group of teachers and friends, and then they'll have to get on a bus upwards of an hour sometimes just to stay in that school system. But they can start in a new school year, but oftentimes there's a lot of change involved in that. So we try to, help guide them along in that decision and weigh the pros and cons, but also work with them in the tutoring environment in the shelter after school. So they are going to school, but the tutoring supplements the school. As you know, these homework assignments could pile up, and even just the lessons that they learn during the school year, it's often better to have a positive role model in the evening, helping them work through these challenges and keep them on track as well.
So they have the consistency of that same tutor all the time, which is, I assume if you're homeless, consistency is so important. Now, do you also do remote support where, do they have a laptop? Do they have a tablet? Are they able to do remote support also?
Yes. So, of course, the pandemic has dramatically impacted students that are experiencing homelessness. Certainly the school systems were struggling in the past year to connect with students, and they worked wonders to create remote models for students in the school systems to work online. And School on Wheels partnered with a lot of school systems to adapt similar programs to continue to connect with students more often. And we also got a grant to purchase Chromebooks for students that are in our program. So some school systems only gave out one Chromebook per family, per address. and oftentimes they had to share.
Yeah.
So it came down to some students were able to get on a Zoom meeting with a class, others weren't. That's where School on Wheels came in and provided them with Chromebooks to be able to access their school during the day.
Yep.
But also we set up remote tutoring as well. Certainly it's not the same as in-person tutoring, but we were able to connect with students remotely. And oftentimes the students were teaching some of our tutors how to log in, and
Which is
it
great.
was great to connect with them and check in and
Yeah.
help drive consistency with them.
Right, and again, that word consistency is so important. Now, do you also run School on Wheels during the summer where traditionally there's not traditional school going on?
Yeah, this is one of the programs that we're so excited about because we were out of the shelters providing in-person tutors for almost a year. So certainly we were able to connect remotely, but we were working with, we have an education committee with volunteers in the community that sit on this committee, and some of them are principals and teachers and homeless liaisons. And they were saying in the springtime, a lot of the students were experiencing gaps in social emotional learning. And we identified that we needed to get our in-person tutoring sessions back up and running. So we mobilized our volunteers and our site coordinators, and our education director opened summer tutoring for the first time in years. And to be able to go back into the shelters and safely tutor and see our students, they were so excited
Sure.
to see their tutors, and we're one big family.
Oh, that's
So the students were coming up to the School on Wheels volunteers and giving us great big hugs.
oh,
And,
sure.
they were always looking forward to that weekly session with them. And
Absolutely.
it really was great to get, again, that group together, learning and having fun.
That's great. Good for you. And obviously, this isn't cheap. I mean, all of this costs money. So how are you funded? How do you raise money for School on Wheels?
Yeah, so School on Wheels provides these services at no charge. So we are a nonprofit organization, and it costs nearly $1 million each year to provide all our programs and services. And we do this by fundraising and via individuals, corporations, grants, and some state funding as well. But we could not do what we do without the generosity of the community donating
Yeah.
and giving back their treasure to help us further our mission.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you is about the people that you actually have as your tutors, as your mentors. Are they all volunteers, and how can people get involved?
Yes, we always say we're so thankful for the generosity of time, talent, and treasure. Certainly, folks donate the treasure in order for us to continue our mission, but also the time. We have hundreds of volunteers. All of our tutors are volunteers that want to give back to the community. So we couldn't be more blessed and thankful to have all these volunteers that help out in our shelters. But in addition to our volunteer tutors, to give away 6,000 backpacks is such an operation. It's a year-long operation that there's so many different community groups that come in to School on Wheels to put together some backpacks like you see in the background there.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the community volunteer their time, come to School on Wheels and spend a day with us putting together backpacks. It's fun to see the competition of some of the groups. They say, we want to do 50 today. We want to do 100.
Oh, that's great.
We have a grand old time, and it's all for good. It's all for the kids that we're putting these backpacks together, and back to school time, there's nothing better than delivering these backpacks to students who need it.
Well, what a wonderful mission, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope people will check out your website and get involved and help to this very noble cause that you're with. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Joy.
Thanks, Julie and Stephen. To learn more and get involved, visit the School on Wheels of Massachusetts website at sowma.org. Shake Your Soul is back at the Kingston Council on Aging, a joyful, invigorating, and gentle expressive dance experience that works for every body. This unique approach to body-spirit fitness invites you to connect consciously with your own body. The 8-week session begins on Tuesday, September 14th from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Contact Brenda Fitzgerald at 781-831-6042 to register. The music for this class is inspired by world beats and beloved classics, and your hips and heart will enjoy the easy-to-follow, fluid movements that will help maintain your body's strength, grace, and balance. Hot Topics on Beacon Hill with Senator Patrick O'Connor, Representative Josh Cutler, and Representative Kathy Lenatra is a new course offered by the Duxbury Senior Center. Running from September 24th through October 29th at 10:30 to 11:30 a.m., this class will give participants the opportunity to explore issues that the legislature will consider this political session, discuss hot topics of the week, and learn all sides of the issues in this informative class where group participation is key. A virtual option may be available for homebound or long-distance learners. Please contact Senior Center Assistant Director Angela Sanat for registration details. As we get into our 50s, 60s, and 70s, the many transitions occurring in our work, life, and home can feel overwhelming. To explore options, discuss ideas, and create community around these transitions, the Plymouth Public Library is offering a monthly program for mature adults called Work, Life, Home, Older Adults and Transitions. In the first session on Wednesday, September 22nd from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m., the topical discussion will be home, the factors deciding where we will live and what we hope home looks like into our older years. The second half of the program, Decluttering and Downsizing, You Can't Take It With You, focuses on the ways having too much stuff can impede our lives, relocation, or even receiving health care in our homes. Presented by the AARP, this presentation can help get you started on downsizing and decluttering with practical, easy-to-follow tips. This program will meet monthly through the winter. Visit the Plymouth Public Library website to register. This has been an extraordinary year and a half so far, in which our health, resources, energy, and emotions have been immensely overburdened and stressed. We have an ongoing mental health crisis, and our therapists and counselors have been an invaluable resource for so many. But the surge in demand for mental health support has taken a toll on our care providers, while also personally enduring this pandemic. We sat down with our friend, licensed mental health counselor Leslie Cutler, for her perspective. So, Leslie, more than 1 year into this epidemic, circumstances are still changing constantly. So we're riding a roller coaster of uncertainty. What does that do to people living with constant uncertainty?
Well, I think that's somewhat of the definition of trauma. When your current environment no longer feels safe, it no longer feels expected. There's no more rhythm of life. And that's the thing, the consistency that brings us all back down. So this constant state of uncertainty makes it absolutely impossible for any of us to plan our future, to plan what we imagined, junior year, our wedding, all these big milestones sit kind of dormant and holding.
In processing for the future, what can we look to for the psychological needs whenever this is over?
Right. And, I think so much of this leads back to grief, because there is a loss in not having these ceremonies, these rituals. These have been put in place as a way to help us move from one part of our life into the next. And it's almost a doorway of acceptance and celebration. And when we can't have that process, we can't have that ritual, a lot of times that grief does not get processed as well. And it's, we think of grief frequently in terms of death, but there's also grief in the unexpected not happening, because so often we don't realize what our expectations are until they're not met.
What is the true definition of trauma? Because speaking personally, I'm looking at this whole last year and a half as a slow rolling trauma. Am I looking
Yeah.
at it the wrong way?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because the word trauma, again, gets used a lot. And I think that we need to be careful. Not all trauma leads to PTSD or chronic PTSD. So let's talk about this a little bit. So trauma can be any situation that makes a person feel unsafe, can bring up feelings of scared feelings or sadness or loss or anything. I mean, a lot of times we think of trauma in terms of maybe a severe car accident, or, you know, maybe somebody's sexually assaulted or somebody's been to war. And those are kind of extreme examples of trauma, but trauma can be much less significant as well. And cumulatively, we've been all feeling this. All at once, we're all kind of going through this. But granted, yes, we all have different tools. So some people may develop PTSD, and that post-traumatic stress disorder would look like, you know, maybe an individual having nightmares, or you know, dissociating at times, or you know, not being able to deal with certain senses because smells, sounds, because it brings them back to a certain place. So depending on what somebody's history is, depending on the tools that they have, depending on their personal experience during this pandemic, would determine whether or not it becomes an actual diagnosis like post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of the trauma.
What are you seeing in your own life, in your own treatment, and your colleagues and healthcare professionals whom I'm sure you're interacting with, in how they are processing or how they're putting one foot in front of the other right now?
Well, I think mental health has always been, you know, a field that's been underfunded, underpopulated, because it is underfunded, and because the burnout rate is exceptionally high. Also is, you know, a tremendous amount of education is required, and so when, you know, the salaries can't meet the educational demands and you know, that sort of thing, there tends to be a bit of fallout. But this is a system that was taxed before this ever happened. And now we have a global pandemic. And honestly, it has been overwhelming beyond words. And, you know, at some point, there's not enough self-care or space for, you know, rejuvenation or recharge out there to keep us going, but yet we do. You know, I personally get a lot of refueling from other professionals in the field. I have a lot of very close friends that do the same work as I, and you know, we like to get together and share our, you know, our feelings and how we're processing things on a, you know, kind of a very high level of just where we're at. And we haven't even been able to see each other because of the enormous amount of, we all just have had our noses down for over a year.
So what does that do to you as a person in your functioning? How are you?
You know, I'm okay.
Because you have to be.
Because I'm sleep deprived. I'm really weary. And it's not the kind of weary that, you know, a weekend on the Cape is gonna, you know, take away. I'm frequently overwhelmed, I'll be honest. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's an awful lot.
What is your advice for coping skills?
You know, you and I talked prior to this beforehand, and it almost feels hypocritical to have this conversation because it is such a struggle for me. So it's really simple. Walking my dog in the woods every day is something that happens rain or shine. And it's so simple, and it almost sounds ridiculous to say. But I, you know, don't answer my phone, and we just walk. and we do the same ridiculous walk every day through the same location.
But you're getting nature. You're getting
Yes.
an animal who's asking nothing from you but to be on a walk.
Right. You know, and I can do that because it's for her. She needs to get out, right? So
Yes.
if I can't do it for me, I can do it for her, because it's hard to justify doing anything for me at this point.
An important part of human exchange is the exchange of energy, the support
Yes.
and the nourishment that we get from being in each other's presence, right? Right now, we're in each other's presence
Yes.
because we're vaccinated, we're sitting at a distance. You came in masked, we are fully masked in this
Right.
facility.
Right.
But your practice now, by necessity, has had to move to telehealth.
Yes.
Is there something lost, some level of communication that you're not able to accomplish through telehealth?
I initially was quite hesitant. The reality was there was absolutely no way for me to see the number of clients that I see and maintain proper, you know, CDC regulations. I couldn't wipe down my couches because they're fabric. You know, we would need to sit on metal chairs. I couldn't take temperatures coming in and see the number of people that I see. So it's moved to my home office, which was my former art studio. So we did a little moving around, and I moved the studio and everything else, and I set up a space. And a large chunk of my population that I specialize in see are young adults and teenagers, you know, those who are age 11 to about age 30 is probably about 90% of my population. So that population is very accustomed to using technology. And in some ways, it's been absolutely wonderfully incredible, because they can show me their rooms, they can show me things in their rooms, they can introduce me to friends and people in their homes. You know, we would never be able to do this if I was in the office. I get to see them in their own environments, which I never do.
So it's the converse. You actually get a broader picture of their
Yes.
lives.
Yet they show me things on their wall that are meaningful to them, which brings up conversations that we would have never had they been in my office. Also, for a lot of these kids, some of them have parents that have been working around the clock since the pandemic has started, because there's doctors, nurses, whatever, and they don't need to worry about transporting their children to my office. So the kids never miss their appointment. It never needs to be rescheduled. You know, and I work until quite late in the evening, and I have kids that are all ready for bed, you know, sitting on their beds, having their session right before going to bed, and we can close with a little meditation, and then they go to sleep. So, you know, in that way, there's so much about it that works beautifully.
Could this potentially be a progression of a new way to effectively help people?
Well, I believe that this has changed a lot in the mental health field. It works. Does it work with all individuals? No. Does it work with all populations? No. Not everybody has access to an iPhone or FaceTime or Zoom or some of these other platforms that we're using. So, but I do think that especially for those in very rural areas that don't have access to mental health services, this is groundbreaking. And, you know, I currently have clients literally all over the US right now. And it's, you know, my caseload has shifted from just local folks to friends and, you know, colleagues and everybody else kind of in a larger, you know, geographic area. So that part has worked really, really quite well. The downside is you know, technology can be a jerk sometimes.
Yeah, it can.
You know, sometimes cameras freeze, or you know, and people can't hear as well, and so you know, we work around those. But I would say the benefits probably outweigh the disadvantages.
That's incredible. That's a great thing. So
Yeah.
something great that has come out of this.
Absolutely.
Relationships.
Yes.
Anecdotally, I'm hearing so many more people deciding, you know, when this is over, I'm going to go live on the island. I'm getting into that RV. I'm divorcing my husband. Not me, but
Right.
Or we are knitted together so much more. So what is it about this time that is laying bare the realities of relationships or lives.
Yeah, I think it's stripped away all the extras, and it's brought many things down to its bare bones, so we can look at it for what it is. And like all things, there's beauty in that, and there's also ugliness. And there have been a number of individuals deciding to make changes in their lives in regards to their work that they do, their jobs, relationships. But what do you do when you decide you want a divorce in the middle of a pandemic? You can't do anything. So there's a lot of things, relationships that have become quite toxic, that are on hold until the courts are less backed up, till a person goes back to work so they can retain an attorney, or another kind of piece that adds to this is, as you know, folks have been drinking a lot more alcohol since the pandemic started, and I don't know whether that's for coping or out of boredom, but that adds a whole other level of kind of complexity and chaos to relationships that could be, in need of a little bit of help before all this started. So,
So we have people who have always been in crisis, or who are very vulnerable, who are maybe in relationships or in circumstances of domestic abuse. So those vulnerable populations, because of an overtaxed, stressed system, are in more crisis than ever and almost unreachable.
Yeah, trying to find a safe bed for somebody who is struggling with a domestic, violence situation is near impossible, because facilities are full, but they can't be completely full because they're trying to, respect COVID guidelines, so they can only be partially full, and they were full before, before all of this started. So, there's a lot of people stuck in, very horrible kind of compromised situations. There's also a lot of children who depend on, resources with the schools for food and for, therapy, or for, various therapies. And, they have not been able to get that as well. And, I know that we've looked and tried to find ways, the government is working to find ways to ensure that some of these needs are met, but the reality is that it's really unfortunate that nothing is happening quite yet.
So we really need to go back to the neighborhoods and looking out for each other.
Checking in on our neighbors and the people we care about, giving of our time if we can, and our resources. I mean, it sounds so basic, but there's so many struggling through this.
And in some ways, in good times, we don't need each other as much, or we don't think that we do. And the reality of how much we need each other, particularly locally in our society, currently, we are also having a sort of reckoning where things have become more tribal, if you will. There seems to be more that we are objecting to in each other's philosophies or thought processes, which seems antithetical to what we need to get to.
Yes.
Is there a reason why this is happening? That well, there are many reasons why. But is there at a time of fear, do people become more tribal?
I think you and I know that there's been clearly a significant change in attitude since this has started. I believe that the original feeling going into this was one of hope. And, I remember every day at a certain time, they would cheer the nurses on and the healthcare workers going into the hospitals as the shifts were changing. And, people were being kind to elderly people, knowing that they were struggling with, a significant amount of loneliness and that sort of thing. And I don't know if it's just absolute fatigue, exhaustion, or, if people are just kind of hitting some level of despair, but it seems like we are so polarized and divided. And I don't know, my personal feeling is that people are on edge. People are blasting their horns at each other if somebody's driving a little bit slower, or even just the speed limit. People are snapping and irritable. And all of these are reactions to grief, to loss. All these are indicators of depression. And, I see it and I feel it, and I don't know what the answer is. So, I see it as we maybe all take responsibility for ourselves and try to bring awareness of kindness and love to those that we come encounter with on a daily basis, because this has not been an easy road.
Late August of 2021 right now, we're entering fall. With uncertainty, we don't know.
Yes.
What is your greatest hope for the coming year?
Well, obviously that those who can will get vaccinated, and should a booster be required in the future, that people will be open to that. I also think my greatest hope is that people reevaluate priorities, because there have been some sweet spots that have come from this. I've never spent so much time with my children as I have during this pandemic. And it's been an honor to be with them through this time and to see their growing and their learning and their changing. And I don't want that to ever go away. I don't want to ever be so busy again that doesn't be, the most important thing. So maybe we just all sort of reevaluate what's important to us.
Thank you, Leslie. If you're feeling in crisis, anxious, depressed, or would just like some support in maintaining your emotional well-being, there is help. Visit the Massachusetts Department of Public Health resource page on the mass.gov website. Many providers are offering virtual therapy sessions through telehealth visits, and there are 24-hour hotlines for crisis intervention. It's become almost cliche to say we will get through this together, but it is truly the only way we will, right? Do you find yourself straining to hear during conversations? Get it tested by board-certified hearing instrument specialist Lauren Warburton, who will be at the Pembroke Council on Aging on September 8th, October 13th, November 10th, and December 8th from 10 to 11 a.m. Call 781-294-8220 to sign up and reserve your spot. Next up, we have poet Judith Pardelow, who lives on Cape Cod with her husband Thomas Slater, who is also a published poet. This is her original work.
Hello. I'm going to read one poem from my first chapbook, A Woman's Heart, and then 4 poems from my second chapbook, Carry Me Back, A Woman's Life in Poetry. That one. At my work in the surgical unit, I see couples, lots of couples. Couples who've been together for a long time, or maybe not so long. I observe little things, signs and touches, jokes and laughter, annoyances, curtness, disparagement. I make note of the ones I want and don't want for my life. I see men who can't get away too soon when they're dropping off their wives for surgery. I see the men who pace and worry and can't wait to go in to see their wives before and after major and sometimes very minor surgeries. I feel envious when a man is sweet, tender, caring, and doesn't seem to notice anyone else but the woman he is with. I want that. I want that man who can see only me, who sees into me, who sees with me, confides in me, rejoices with me, cries with me. I want those fingers intertwined with mine, that love breath on my face, that gentle pressure where I hurt, those eyes that search my face for how I feel. I want that for me, that man, that one, that one. Memorial Day dessert. Dad, telling war stories, pushing back from the table, full, relaxed, youthful, though gray streaks invade his hair. Remembering fellow Marines bombed just as he left the gully to get more ammunition. War stories for dessert from my purple-hearted dad. How close he came to a flag and a grave, a place of coffee and a piece of cake. Tribute to my mother. As a child raised on dad's low income, my mother's tuna casseroles were often served, especially during Lent. My fondness for those casseroles I attribute to my creative mother. I like the challenge of nothing left in the refrigerator to pique my interest. I find bits of onion, dried up mushrooms, soggy celery, a lingering clove of garlic, container of condensed soup, leftover green beans, saltines, a wedge of butter, broth made from the seeds and stalks of vegetables or roasted chicken bones, a can of tuna skulking behind baked beans on the shelf, and opened packages of noodles. With some sauteing, seasoning, and baking, the concoction arrives on the table, lit with candles, adorned with gleaming goblets, cloth napkins in their rings, to be scooped onto spotless plates, and the final touch, a nod to mother's flair to meet my father's taste for something sweet, a dollop of grape jelly on the side. Carry me back. The fragrance of sweet scented cigars lifts me in the rickety elevator to my first job on the 17th floor at a Philadelphia insurance company, hired by two old men who puffed inexorable smoke into the building's walls. A spray of white shoulders, and that slutty senior high school girl appears who drenched daily in the pungent stuff, sending a message to all that she is in the halls. A sniff of Jean Naté, and I'm at college, my sorority sisters bathing in it as we powdered and splashed. A whiff of scotch, and I'm doubled over the toilet bowl in my boyfriend's upper crust apartment. Essence of rose petals flies me over oceans, cities, plains, to Israel on pilgrimage to holy places. And bougainvillea sends me straight down to Bahamas, where we lived 3 months awaiting work visas to teach. My mother is emerald, the oriental perfume permeating her trousseau of silks and satins that became my dress-up clothes when I acted out movie stars, nuns, cowgirls, and queens. Give me the scent of tobacco in the pocket of a shirt, and I'm back on my father's lap, cradled in his arms as I cried, for whatever reasons little girls cry. His pell-mells the aroma of a loving dad forever. Anthology. I keep jars of multicolored glass, fragments found on scattered beaches, a collection of colors, the gathering of which joins the jagged edges of the past and holds them safely in a bottle on my shelf. Pieces of pottery intrigue, broken cups and saucers, dishes and tureens, the wares of women spilling off the waves, faded patterns of a woman's dreams. The crockery seized and smashed that once was filled, then washed and wiped and gently placed upon the board.
To learn more about Judith's work, visit her website at www.judithpartolo.com. Thank you for staying with us for this episode of Local Matters. From all of us at PAC TV, have a happy and safe week. We will see you next time. Thank you for watching. We are grateful for your attention. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe to The Local Scene here and share everywhere. Thank you, friends.